This video is discussing events from Seasons 1 and Seasons 2 of Yellowjackets. If you have not seen through episode 206 of Yellowjackets, you are warned. This video will contain spoilers. In Season 2 of Yellowjackets, Natalie's storyline has been set almost entirely on the campus of Lottie's wellness cult. But it was not until episode 206, entitled K, that Natalie took the first significant step toward actually joining the cult when she reached for and put on a purple pair of Birkenstocks, purple socks, purple dress, and a purple sweater. But as Lottie points out,
it's heliotrope, it's not purple.
To explain how Natalie went from calling Lottie's wellness cult a bunch of purple fucks to wearing the heliotrope herself, we need to understand something about the nature of cults and the social psychological tactics they employ to recruit members. In their book, The Age of Propaganda, The Everyday Use and Abuse of Persuasion, Pratkanis and Aronson define a cult as a pattern of social relations in which members are dependent on the group and leader for all their social, emotional, and material resources. To that extent, and despite Lottie's arguments to the contrary, her wellness retreat is probably a cult. The members of Lottie's wellness cult relinquish their cell phones, rendering them socially dependent, surrender control of their money to Lottie, rendering them financially dependent, and adopt the retreat's unconventional therapeutic methods, rendering them emotionally dependent on the group. And of course, all these concessions to the cult occur in an extremely remote and relatively hidden location on the most extreme end of upstate New York, off Highway 19. So, even if the food is great and the BO factor is really low, Lottie is running a cult. However, it might not be an abusive cult, because, as Misty points out, the members do seem pretty happy. And yet, despite Natalie's justified skepticism at the totalizing nature of Lottie's wellness cult, Natalie's change of heart is explained by two social psychological principles translating into two tactics cults typically employ to win over new members, like Acolyte Rob, who understands that
you're what's important. Charlotte will help you see that.
The first principle is the norm of reciprocity, which, according to Pratkanis and Aronson, states, if I do something for you, then you are obligated to return the favor and do something for me. As the aforementioned authors point out, the norm of reciprocity is universal because in any functioning society, people feel indebted to one another in a network of mutually obligatory relationships. In a 1971 study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Reagan found that when research participants were given a Coca-Cola by a study partner, they agreed to purchase twice as many raffle tickets from that partner than participants who were not given a Coca-Cola. Even more interesting is that the number of raffle tickets sold was unchanged when the gift-giving study partner was presented as rude to another study participant, meaning that even unlikable people can invoke the norm of reciprocity with an altruistic gift. Cult members use the norm of reciprocity to initiate a relationship with the recruit and induce them to make an initial public commitment to the cult. In the language of those who study cults, invoking the norm of reciprocity is called love bombing. But, unlike Reagan's experiment, which involved a one-time gift of a single Coca-Cola, love bombing can occur over a period of days or weeks and can involve a series of material, social, and/or emotional gifts. Furthermore, to enact the process of love bombing, cults often employ a handler, or a person who becomes a friend to the new recruit, and who is ultimately responsible for administering the love bombing and acting as a kind of guide through the initiation process. Natalie's handler or administrator of the love bombing process is Lisa. Lisa and Natalie start out as adversaries in episode 201, with Natalie stabbing Lisa in the hand and face to escape her suicide prevention restraints. But the two gradually warm toward one another, with the relationship reaching a turning point in episode 203 after Lisa publicly and profoundly forgives Natalie for almost blinding her with a dinner fork. Following that reconciliation, Lisa becomes Natalie's primary interpreter of Lottie's wellness cult, and the two begin the reciprocal exchange of considerations and assistance that becomes the foundation of their sincere friendship. On an outing to Lisa's mother's house to look in on Lisa's goldfish, Natalie learns that Lisa was also initially skeptical of Lottie's wellness cult. But presumably, Lisa was won over by what seems to be a more effective treatment for her depression than the medical approach forced on her by a suffocating mother. And it was during the aforementioned outing that Nat was a real friend to Lisa when she defended Lisa against the punishing words of Lisa's mother, and ultimately, Natalie performed a heroic act for Lisa when she smuggled Lisa's fish out of her mother's house in her own mouth. Lisa returned Natalie's gesture of friendship after Natalie learned that Travis's emotional descent and eventual suicide started with her overdose and expressed fear that the darkness followed them in from the wilderness. In a sincerely beautiful act of support, Lisa reminded Natalie that she can't be responsible for another person's suicide. Natalie replied by confiding in Lisa that the Yellowjackets did horrible things in the wilderness, and that maybe they didn't even deserve to have survived. To further protect Natalie from harming herself, Lisa gave Natalie the goldfish that Natalie broke out of Lisa's house and explained that Natalie needs to be responsible for something innocent during this difficult time. Somewhat surprised by Lisa's consideration, Natalie confronts her about the sincerity of their relationship when she asks Lisa why she forgave her for stabbing her in the face. Lisa responded with the spiritual claim that suffering is inevitable and that only by meeting it with compassion can we truly begin to grow. As the camera pushes in on Natalie, it seems clear that Lisa's prescription resonates. Although Natalie doesn't feel like she deserves Lisa's friendship, when Natalie accepts the fish, she is faced with a choice. She can reject Lisa's gift of the fish, allow it to perish, and continue down the dark path toward suicide. Or she can care for the fish and accept the reality of living another day. Of course, as any understanding of Natalie would need to admit, it would be against her nature to allow something bad to happen to an innocent fish. As a result, Natalie had no choice but to accept Lisa's gift of both the fish and the friendship. And once she accepted it, she was bound by the norm of reciprocity, resulting in her wearing the heliotrope clothing as a way of showing her gratitude to Lisa and more broadly to the wellness cult. With the donning of those clothes, we can expect the second principle of social psychology and cult recruitment to become operative. According to Pratt-Canis and Aronson, recruits are pulled deeper into a cult through the principle of consistency. As humans have a natural norm of reciprocity, they also have a natural desire to act consistently with prior behaviors. When humans fail to act consistently, they experience what Leon Festinger called cognitive dissonance, defined as the unpleasant feeling driving one to make one's actions, values, and beliefs consistent with one another. Once recruits accept the gift of love bombing, they are far more likely to make a public act of commitment, which then becomes a powerful basis for subsequent acts of cult-consistent behavior. Research conducted by Aronson, Fried, and Stone, published in a 1991 issue of the American Journal of Public Health, found that compared to college students who made a private commitment to practicing safe sex, college students who made a public commitment to practicing safe sex were almost twice as likely to report acting on that commitment. Thus, when cult recruits make a public commitment to a cult, they are far more likely to escalate their commitment to much greater levels of participation in the cult's activities. In extreme cases, like in the case of the Manson family, escalating levels of commitment resulted in breaking and entering, and even murder. Lottie's wellness retreat does not appear to be abusive like Charles Manson's family, Jim Jones's People's Temple, or Rock Therese's Anthill Kids. That said, many abusive cults did not start out as abusive, and the people who join cults don't perceive that they're joining a cult. In fact, they think they are just joining something like a wellness community. Moreover, the process of cult formation and maintenance meets genuine human needs. As a result, Lisa and Natalie's burgeoning friendship and Natalie's decision to wear the heliotrope clothing are expressions of both the human need for interpersonal connection and the human need for group belonging. Social psychologists merely explain how cults exploit these natural processes, but that exploitation does not make those processes any less human sincere, or, in the case of Lisa and Natalie, beautiful. It is a powerful testament to the complexity and talent of the Yellowjackets' writing that Lisa and Natalie's relationship can be both endearing and a manifestation of the nefarious means by which cults can and do recruit members for eventual exploitation and/or abuse. Again, I am not convinced that Lottie's cult is abusive. That said, I'm also in genuine suspense as to how the reemergence of Lottie's dark visions and potential mental illness might affect the extraordinarily vulnerable members of her wellness community. In a 2020 Insider article, Naf reported that according to cult recovery experts, there are 3 kinds of cult leaders. The delusional martyr recruits people to participate in the leader's sincerely held delusion. Marshall Applewhite, the leader of Heaven's Gate, was a delusional martyr who convinced his 39 members to commit mass suicide out of a belief that their bodies would be elevated to a higher existence. At the end of episode 206, Van invokes the memory of Marshall Applewhite by asking Ty to look out for the black Nikes. The preacher-turned-egomaniac begins as an authentic leader of an organization run for the benefit of its membership. But over time, they become drunk on their own power and bend the organization toward exploitation. Jim Jones was a preacher-turned-egomaniac. Finally, there is the simple narcissist who cynically uses their own charisma and followers' vulnerability to advance their own hedonistic desires for indulgence and unchecked power. Charles Manson represents the narcissistic cult leader. Lottie does not seem to be a narcissistic leader, nor does she seem to be the kind of person who would enjoy power for its own sake. And yet, the return of Lottie's dark visions and her drift toward believing they are real, as opposed to manifestations of her mental illness, places her followers at risk of becoming the victims of a delusional martyr. The question of whether or not Lottie's wellness cult is or will become abusive is suspenseful. As audiences, we are likely to gain access to the cult's inner dynamics through the perspective of characters like Natalie, who become our proxy acolytes. When Natalie chose to wear the heliotrope clothing after accepting the gift of friendship and the symbolic gift of the fish from Lisa, Natalie made a public commitment to the cult and has started down the path of consistency-driven escalating commitment. It is therefore reasonable to predict that among the surviving Yellowjackets, Natalie will become the audience's proxy within Lottie's cult, and through her perspective, we will learn more about the cult's eccentric treatments, like the ritual burial in episode 201, and we should learn more about the cult's fundamental character as either abusive or beneficial. In addition, it will be interesting to see how the wellness cult might draw Misty into its clutches. Indeed, that process seems to have already begun with the celebrity treatment she's enjoying from the other members. Could that treatment be just another form of love bombing? Tell me what you think in the comments. Is Nat taking her first steps toward full membership in Lottie's wellness cult? Is that cult abusive, or will it become abusive? How about Misty? Will she also be joining the cults? Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, like it. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe for more double takes.